As the convoy came to a halt, an eerie silence settled over the crowd. Then, one by one, mouths fell open in disbelief. Their eyes darted from one dignified figure to another until they landed on her, the one they least expected. "Erike," someone whispered. Another voice, louder this time, repeated, "Erike?" Then, like the roar of an untamed river, the murmur swelled into a deafening chant. "Erike! Erike the lazy girl! Erike the lazy girl! Erike the lazy girl!" The crowd surged forward, blocking the road entirely. People craned their necks, standing on tiptoes, pushing and pulling, desperate to confirm what their eyes refused to believe. How could Erike, the good-for-nothing sluggard, be among such noble and powerful figures? How could she emerge from a convoy that looked more like that of a governor or a high-ranking minister? The Akinwale family sat frozen in their seats, their hearts pounding. The shouts grew wilder, the excitement turning into something dangerously unpredictable. Akinwale tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his father's forehead creased in deep worry, and even Rhoda, always composed, clenched her fists, sensing the tension rising. Then, as if the heavens themselves had intervened, a new sound cut through the chaos, a series of sharp, commanding whistles. And then out of nowhere they appeared. Uniformed policemen, fierce and unyielding, materialized like spirits dropping from the sky. No one had seen them coming, no one knew where they emerged from, but there they were, forming an impenetrable barrier between the convoy and the surging crowd. Their presence was like an invisible force parting the sea. "Move back!" one officer bellowed, his voice slicing through the noise like a blade. The crowd hesitated. The moment was surreal. 1 minute, they had blocked the road with their bodies, and now, they found themselves backing away as the officers efficiently cleared a passage. Was this a miracle? A divine intervention? Or had Erike, the lazy girl, somehow ascended to a realm they could never comprehend? With a mixture of fear, awe, and confusion, the people stepped aside. And then, just like that, the convoy, gliding as though carried by unseen hands, passed through the sea of stunned onlookers. The Akinwale family did not speak. They did not need to. They simply exchanged glances, each one feeling the same thing, that they had just witnessed something beyond human explanation. "Erike, what kind of person are you?" Akinwale's father turned to Erike, his face still carrying the weight of everything that had just happened. Who could have predicted this madness? The shock, the crowd, the police, everything was spinning out of control. Erike, unfazed, lazily stretched in her seat and let out a slow yawn. Then, without even looking at him, she muttered, "Your lazy daughter-in-law to be." Akinwale's father's jaw dropped. His mother gasped. The rest of the family turned to look at her in astonishment. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, Akinwale asked, "But who arranged for these police officers?" Erike flicked a lazy glance at him and shrugged. "Fadik." Everyone chorused in unison, some in exasperation, some in amusement. "Erike." Others, shaking their heads, chanted, "Rhoda." Akinwale, still overwhelmed by the unfolding drama, leaned closer to Rhoda and whispered into her ear, his voice laced with concern. "Tell me, Rhoda, who are you for real? Please tell me." For once, Rhoda lost her usual cool. She turned sharply to him, her eyes flashing. "Your piece, of course. How many times must I tell you?" Akinwale blinked, then suddenly broke into a smile. He chuckled softly and shook his head. "I'm sorry, my dear. Right on, I'm enjoying the drama. I love you." Rhoda's expression softened instantly. She smiled and whispered back, "I love you too." Then, right there in front of everyone, she pulled him close and planted a deep, affectionate kiss on his lips. The crowd erupted. A wave of shouts, gasps, cheers, and stunned murmurs rippled through the people like a shockwave. "Ewa! She kissed him. In public. Ah, see love oh. So it's true. She brought her in-laws to meet her mother." A new wave of excitement surged through the already chaotic scene. The realization settled in. This wasn't just a visit. Erike has come to officially introduce her new family to her mother. The people went wild. The police, already struggling to keep order, now had an even harder time calming the excited mob. Some were cheering, others were dancing, while a few stood frozen in disbelief, as though struggling to comprehend the full weight of what they had just witnessed. But one thing was clear, this was no ordinary introduction. This was Erike, and nothing about her would ever be ordinary. The moment the excitement in the street settled, the second half of Akinwale's family, who had been hiding in their cars out of fear of the crowd, finally found the courage to step out. One by one, they emerged, their faces a mixture of curiosity, relief, and eagerness to finally meet the legendary woman they had come all this way to see. And then, as if she had appeared out of thin air, Fadik materialized before them once again, her usual composure unshaken. The moment Uncle Philip spotted her, he let out an exclamation. "Fadik! You again!" Fadik, ever polite, gave a small bow. "For your service, sirs and mas." Without another word, she gestured with her hand, as if commanding them to follow her. But this time, instead of leading them to the most luxurious hotel in Africa, she took them on a journey deep into the heart of one of the poorest communities in the country. Turn after turn, they found themselves winding through narrow, dusty streets filled with dilapidated houses and uncompleted structures. The further they went, the heavier the air became. Hunger-stricken children stood at the roadside, waving at them with excitement, barefoot, their clothes tattered, their innocent smiles masking the harsh reality of their existence. Akinwale's family members grew quieter with every turn. And then at last they stopped. "Please subscribe." Before anyone could say a word, Rhoda stepped forward, her voice filled with excitement. "Welcome to my humble home." She turned to Akinwale and gestured toward the writing on the wall of the house. Bold letters stared back at them. "Peace Villa." Then Rhoda smiled. "I wrote that with my own handwriting. It was here I found lasting peace and enduring wisdom." For a moment, silence. Then, from somewhere behind them, soft sniffles filled the air. Folake was crying, and she wasn't alone. At least 4 others had tears streaming down their faces. Even Funso, Akinwale's cousin, lost control of himself. With emotion choking his voice, he suddenly blurted out, "Please, Rhoda, do me the honor of rebuilding this house." But before Rhoda could respond, Fadik's voice rang out. "We rented the house." A stunned silence followed. Then Rhoda turned to Funso, looked him straight in the eye, and said firmly, "Permission granted." A thunderous applause erupted. Even Akinwale's mother, overwhelmed with pride, leaned close to Funso and whispered into his ear, "That's my son. That's the spirit." Funso, visibly moved, turned back to Rhoda and said, "Thank you, Auntie Rhoda." And Rhoda, in a voice that was both gentle and powerful, replied, "You're welcome." Fadik, with a slight nod, excused herself and disappeared inside the house. The Akinwale family stood in silent anticipation. By now, they were familiar with the unpredictable nature of this visit. They had seen too much to be surprised again. Whatever, or whoever, awaited them inside, they were ready. Or so they thought. When Fadik finally reemerged, she was not alone. Beside her stood a woman, stunningly beautiful, radiantly confident, and with an air of quiet authority. She looked no older than her early 50s, yet her presence was ageless. It took them only a moment to recognize her striking resemblance to Fadik. It was uncanny. It was as if time had cloned Fadik, given her a more mature elegance, wrapped her in a simple but perfectly fitting gown, and sent her forth to meet them. For a moment no one spoke. Then, in a voice that was both firm and motherly, the woman turned to Rhoda and, without hesitation, rebuked her. "Erike, what is this you are doing?" she demanded. Her tone wasn't harsh, but it carried the weight of someone who had seen too much to tolerate nonsense. "Did you tell me you would be visiting? And more especially, with your in-laws? When will you ever imbibe wisdom?" Rhoda, the ever-bold, ever-unshaken Rhoda, instantly dropped to her knees. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. "It wasn't my plan, Mama," she pleaded. "It was my fiancé, my husband-to-be. I couldn't tell them no." Before her mother could continue, something unexpected happened. The entire Akinwale family, one by one, knelt down. They had entered this visit as strangers. Now, they were not just guests, they were family seeking acceptance. "We deeply apologize for our unexpected visit." Uncle Philip spoke first, his voice sincere. Akinwale's mother, ever the graceful woman, nodded in agreement. "Had we known, we would have come prepared, Mama. Please forgive us." For a long moment, Rhoda's mother said nothing. Then, finally, her expression softened. With a small sigh, she said, "If I had known you were coming, I would have arranged tables and chairs and prepared a feast for you. But now what can I do?" A soft chuckle rippled through the air. The ice had been broken. Akinwale exchanged a glance with Rhoda, who smiled, a smile of relief, of deep affection, of homecoming. With just a single wink from Rhoda to Fadik, both of them vanished, not in the literal sense, but in a way that made it seem as though they had disappeared into thin air. Moments later, they reappeared not alone, but flanked by several young boys and girls, all carrying different kinds of sitting materials, plastic chairs, wooden benches, and even stools. A silent order had been given. A silent order had been obeyed. Within moments, the once scattered guests were now seated, and just as they were settling in, another wave of people arrived. This time, they were not from the Akinwale family. They were the people of the community, men and women, young and old, drawn by the whispers and shouts that had spread like wildfire. They had come to felicitate with Aya Erike. Or at least, that was what they assumed. But what exactly were they celebrating? An argument broke out among them. Some insisted the celebration was for Erike. Others argued it was for Fadik. Some were convinced it was a political gathering. The earlier convoy had fooled them into believing that. No one was entirely sure. Finally, the first person to speak was a man whose voice carried the weight of authority in the community. The landlord of Aya Erike's house. Unbeknownst to him, his present house would, in a matter of weeks, be pulled down and reconstructed into something he never imagined. But for now, he spoke with confidence and a touch of indignation. Aya Erike, this is highly irresponsible of you, he rebuked. How could you host such a grand occasion without informing me, your landlord, or even the entire community? The murmuring crowd nodded in agreement. Such selfishness, he continued. Not even a pot of jollof rice? No drinks? Nothing for the community? How could you? The murmurs grew louder, heads bobbing in agreement. The Akinwale family watched in utter amusement. Here they were, still trying to wrap their heads around everything that had happened today, yet the community was already treating this as a full-blown festival, complete with accusations and demands for food. Akinwale exchanged glances with Funso, who barely held in a chuckle. This visit had taken so many unexpected turns, but one thing was now clear. Erike's world was full of surprises, and they had only begun to scratch the surface. Aya Erike sat calmly, listening to the uproar of complaints without uttering a single word. Her face remained neutral, her hands resting in her lap as the landlord and the gathered crowd took turns expressing their grievances. She did not interrupt. She did not protest. She let them speak their minds, nodding occasionally, her expression unreadable. But just as the murmurs reached their peak, she slowly turned to Erike and, with a subtle gesture, signaled for her to answer. All eyes turned to Erike. The crowd expected a lengthy defense, a passionate explanation, perhaps even an apology. Instead, Erike lazily yawned as if completely unbothered by their complaints. Stretching her arms, she waved a dismissive hand and said nonchalantly, "Fadik, please answer them. I'm too tired for this." A hushed silence fell over the crowd. "Please subscribe." They couldn't believe their ears. But before anyone could react, Fadik stepped forward, her usual composed expression unchanged. With a graceful smile, she spoke. "My dear elders, brothers, and sisters, we deeply appreciate your warm welcome. But please, understand that we are not here for any formal celebration today." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This is merely a familiarization visit. The family of Erike's husband has come to meet her mother before the proper introduction, engagement, and eventual marriage ceremony." A collective "oh" rippled through the crowd. Heads nodded in understanding. The tension melted away. Some of the women exchanged knowing glances, while the men muttered amongst themselves, piecing together the significance of the visit. The uproar had died down. But one thing was clear. This was just the beginning of a story that would be told for generations. Just as Fadik's words settled over the crowd like a calming wave, a sharp voice cut through the silence, piercing and unapologetic. "My dear family," the woman's voice rang out. "Hope you know whom you have come to betroth?" A murmur spread through the crowd. All eyes turned to her. She was middle-aged, with sharp eyes that had seen too much and lips that had never shied away from speaking the bitter truth. She took a bold step forward, folding her arms across her chest, her gaze shifting between the Akinwales and Aya Erike. "Before you commit to anything, let me do you a favor and tell you what you're signing up for. This girl you have come to carry as a wife," she paused, shaking her head dramatically, "is a complete liability." A hushed gasp rippled through the crowd, but she was just getting started. "This girl, Erike," she jabbed a finger in Erike's direction. "Her mother did not raise her properly. She cannot wash her own clothes, she cannot cook, not even the food she will eat. Talk less of cooking for a family." A few heads nodded. "She has never fetched a single bucket of water in her life. She does not know the first thing about keeping a home. House chores. Forget it. The girl is as useless as they come." The woman's voice rose in pitch, fueled by the murmurs of agreement around her. She turned sharply to Aya Erike, her expression now fierce and unforgiving. "Have you told them the kind of daughter you have?" Aya Erike's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. "Because if you haven't and they find out by themselves, let me tell you what will happen." She lifted a finger dramatically. "They will bring her right back to you like a sack of rice." Dump her at your doorstep and wash their hands clean. She now shifted her full focus to Akinwale, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. Brother, she called out, let me ask you a simple question. Can you cook your own food? Akinwale stared at her, his face blank, his lips pressed together in an unreadable expression. The woman tilted her head, waiting. He did not respond. Can you wash your own plates? Fetch your own water, she pressed on, her voice laced with mock concern. Still no response. She let out a long, exaggerated sigh and clapped her hands together. If not, my dear, I advise you to start making arrangements to hire at least 10 housemaids. Otherwise, you will regret this marriage. The air was thick with tension. Every single pair of eyes in the crowd darted between Eric, Fadik, Aya Eric, and the Akinwales, waiting for anyone to say something. But no one spoke. Not even a whisper. Eric simply stared, her expression unreadable. Fadik's face remained calm, her lips slightly pursed. Aya Eric's eyes flickered with a hint of something deep and unreadable. And Akinwale? He just stood there, unmoving, watching the woman with an expression so still, so controlled, that no one could tell what he was thinking. The entire family of Akinwale remained silent. Not a single word. The woman had said her piece. Now, everyone waited. What would happen next? As the silence stretched, heavy and unbroken, Fadik slowly raised her wrist to check the time. Her brows lifted slightly. It was already past 6 in the evening. A knowing look crossed her face. The journey back home might take longer than expected, especially with the unexpected turn of events they had encountered today. She inhaled deeply, then turned, her sharp, intelligent eyes settling on Mr. Siaka, the landlord of Eric's mother's house. With a calm but firm voice, she spoke. Mr. Siaka, she called, ensuring she had his full attention. I am pleased to inform you that one of the family members of Akinwale, Mr. Funso, has made a decision. The crowd leaned in, curiosity lighting up their faces. Even Mr. Siaka, who had been the first to complain earlier, raised an eyebrow. He has decided to pull down this house and reconstruct it from the ground up. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. And the best part? Fadik continued, her voice smooth. Work will start in just 2 days' time. The entire reconstruction will be completed within 2 months. For a second, there was dead silence. Then, a roar of jubilation erupted from the crowd. Please subscribe. Shouts of excitement filled the air. Women ululated. Men clapped their hands. Children jumped and danced. A few people even lifted Mr. Siaka off his feet, shaking him playfully as they celebrated. Some ran towards Aya Eric, grabbing her hands in joy, congratulating her as if she had just won a grand lottery. Even those who had spoken negatively about Eric minutes ago had now changed their tune, cheering along with the rest. It's a miracle, an elderly woman shouted. I never thought I'd see the day. Ah, this Funso is a real man, someone else added. Omo to NSE Datanayan. Another voice rang out in Yoruba, praising Funso for his kindness. In the midst of the noise, Mr. Siaka, still recovering from the overwhelming excitement, cleared his throat and tried to find his voice. This is good news. This is very good news, he stammered, his face breaking into a broad, pleased smile. He turned to Funso, who stood watching the joyful chaos unfold. Mr. Funso, may God bless you for this. Ah, this is a great thing you have done. Funso simply smiled, but the warmth in his expression was unmistakable. Eric, still as lazy as ever, stretched her arms and yawned loudly, looking completely unfazed by all the excitement happening around her. She turned lazily to Fadik and muttered, This is why I like you, Fadik. You always know how to shut people up. Fadik just chuckled, shaking her head. Meanwhile, amidst the sea of excitement, Akinwale watched everything unfold, his eyes shifting between Eric and the crowd. Something about all this felt surreal. But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. As the jubilation continued, Fadik turned away from the crowd and walked towards her car with a quiet confidence. Without saying a word, she popped open the boot and, to the surprise of everyone, brought out a large, heavy traveling bag. The murmurs began immediately. Ah, what is inside? Money, of course. See how heavy it is. I have never seen a day like this. The people craned their necks, trying to see what Fadik was up to. With deliberate steps, she returned to the center of the gathering and handed the bag over to Mr. Siaka, the landlord. Then she raised her voice so that every single person present could hear her clearly. Inside this bag, she said with authority, is a sum of 1 million naira. Gasps. Shocked expressions. mouths wide open in utter disbelief. A woman clapped both hands to her mouth, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe her ears. Fadik continued, "This money must be judiciously distributed to every single person who came to witness this occasion today." The crowd erupted into wild cheers, some already picturing what they would do with their share. But before the excitement could take full control, Fadik lifted a hand, silencing them instantly. "However," she added, "you must all know one important thing." The people leaned in, waiting for her next words. Fadik smiled faintly, then gestured towards Erike, who was lazily fanning herself with the edge of her wrapper. "This gesture comes directly from the laziest girl in town, Erike." Another gasp. Heads turned towards Erike in shock. "Erike? The lazy girl? Giving out 1 million naira?" The whispers began. "Ah, Erike is rich? So this lazy girl has this kind of money? Huh, so she has just been playing all this while." Even some of the Akinwale family members stared at Erike, trying to process this revelation. "Please subscribe." Meanwhile, Erike lazily stretched again and yawned as if all the drama had nothing to do with her. But before anyone could say more, Fadik's voice rang out again, clear and firm. "One more thing. Not a single kobo from this money should go to one particular person." The crowd fell silent again. Fadik turned sharply to face Irresistible, the very woman who had publicly embarrassed Erike earlier. "No part of this money," Fadik declared, "should be given to the busybody woman, Irresistible." The effect was instant. A loud murmur spread through the crowd. Some people giggled, others tried to hide their amusement, while a few gasped at the boldness of Fadik's words. All eyes snapped to Irresistible, waiting to see how she would react. She did not disappoint. Irresistible's eyes flared with outrage as she clutched her wrapper tightly around her waist. "Ehen," she screeched. "Is it because I told the truth that all of you are ganging up against me? I know that truth is bitter." She hissed loudly, folded her arms, and turned away sharply. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she spun back around and spat out more words. "I don't want your money. Keep it. Blood money. Thief money. Dirty, lazy money." She clapped her hands dramatically in emphasis, muttering more obscenities under her breath as she stormed off. The crowd exploded into laughter. Even Mr. Siaka, the landlord, chuckled as he secured the bag in his grip. Funso, standing beside Akinwale, shook his head and muttered, "Some people will never change." Akinwale, however, was watching Erike closely, fascinated by the layers of mystery surrounding this woman. There was something about her, something that only he could see, and it intrigued him beyond words. As the laughter and murmurs from Irresistible's outburst began to fade, Fadik took center stage once again. With her usual grace and calm authority, she raised a hand, and the crowd fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying over the gathering, "you are all cordially invited to a special dinner at the community's open space." A ripple of surprise and excitement spread through the people. "Dinner," someone whispered. "Free dinner," another gasped. Fadik nodded with a smile. "Yes, dinner. Everyone here is welcome. You have 10 minutes to change into your best ceremony dress and sharpen your appetites. Tonight we feast." The moment the words left her lips, the atmosphere erupted with excitement. People scattered in different directions, rushing home to freshen up, change into their best clothes, and inform their families. The once quiet streets of the community became a hive of activity. Women dashing into their homes, children running barefooted with glee, and men adjusting their wrappers, eager to see what awaited them at the open space. By the time the people arrived at the community's open space, their eyes widened in astonishment. Nobody, not even the most influential elders of the community, had expected what they saw before them. The entire field, where their children normally played football and where major ceremonies were sometimes held, had been transformed into an elegant banquet hall, right under the open sky. 10 massive canopies had been beautifully arranged across the field, each containing at least 200 chairs and tables, all neatly covered in sparkling white linen. At one end of the space, a stage had been set up where a DJ played soft, soothing music. The gentle sound of Afro-jazz and highlife music floated in the air, setting the mood for the grand occasion. But that was not all. To the far left of the field, 2 enormous lorries were parked, and from them, dozens of servers, young boys and girls in matching uniforms, were already unloading trays of food and crates of soft, non-alcoholic wine. The air was thick with the aroma of rich, steaming jollof rice, smoky grilled chicken, tender goat meat pepper soup, fried plantains, and pounded yam with assorted soups. Fresh fruits, chilled soft drinks, and beautifully arranged bottles of grape and apple wine glistened under the bright lights. Yes, bright lights. Multiple generators had been set up, ensuring that the entire space was fully illuminated, giving it an almost magical glow. The people stood still for a moment, taking in the sheer grandeur of the arrangement. This was no ordinary dinner. This was a feast fit for kings. Mouths hung open. Eyes darted around in disbelief. And then, as if on cue, someone let out a loud exclamation. "This is a wedding reception." Laughter and cheers followed. "NN. This is what the rich do. No be small dinner oh. See enjoyment. God abeg let dem always come and marry in this community." The Akinwale family, standing at one corner, were just as astonished. Folake, Funso, and even Akinwale himself were still trying to wrap their heads around the level of preparation that had gone into this seemingly impromptu event. Akinwale's mother leaned toward him and whispered, "My son, are you sure you know who you are marrying?" Akinwale said nothing, but deep inside him, a strange excitement was bubbling in his chest. This night was about to be unforgettable. As the Akinwale family stepped onto the grand site of the feast, the reality of what lay before them hit them fully. The elegant canopies, the neatly arranged tables and chairs, the overwhelming aroma of sumptuous meals filling the air. The people, dressed in their finest, beaming with excitement. Everything looked too perfect, too well prepared, as if the event had been planned weeks in advance. Akinwale's father, bewildered, turned to Rhoda. "When did this happen? Was this a forethought?" Rhoda, standing with an air of lazy confidence, yawned slightly before responding. "Baba, it was arranged when we left Aya Erik's hotel," she said casually. Akinwale's father frowned. "How?" Rhoda stretched her arms, looking even more unbothered. "I took you all through a longer route on purpose," she admitted. "While you were all busy being tourists and repairing the punctured tire, Fadik had already taken the shorter route back. She was the one who made all the arrangements before we even arrived." There was a stunned silence. The Akinwale family exchanged looks. Even Akinwale, who thought he had begun to understand Rhoda's mysterious ways, found himself staring at her in disbelief. Then he chuckled. "Rhoda, you are a mafia." Rhoda simply yawned again and stretched like a lazy cat before replying in a slow, amused tone. "Positive mafia." The entire group burst into laughter. Even Akinwale's father, who was known for his strict and serious nature, could not help but chuckle. Folake, still wiping tears from her earlier emotional moment, shook her head in amazement. "This girl, you are something else," she muttered. As the music played louder and the servers began moving around with steaming trays of food, one thing was clear. Tonight was not just a dinner. It was a statement that Rhoda was not just some helpless, lazy girl. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the lively party continued, Aya Erik finally arrived. She stepped into the venue and froze in place. The grandeur, the lights, the crowd, the exquisite decorations that made the open space look like an event planned for royalty. It was too much to take in at once. When they invited her to the high table, to sit alongside the Akinwale family, her legs nearly gave way beneath her. She had lived her whole life hustling, struggling, surviving. But today she was honored, respected, treated like a queen. She sat down, trying to control her emotions, but the tears betrayed her. Tears of joy, of disbelief, of gratitude. Akinwale's mother, noticing her distress, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Aya Erik, why are you crying? Please subscribe." Aya Erik let out a deep sigh, shaking her head. "I was deceived. Both of my daughters tricked me," she said, her voice shaky. "I knew nothing about this. I don't like surprises. If I had known..." Akinwale's mother smiled and squeezed her hand. "If you had known, you wouldn't have allowed yourself to be celebrated?" she asked softly. The other elders at the table joined in, reassuring her. "This is your day of joy. You are the mother of the bride. You deserve this." Slowly, Aya Erik wiped her tears and nodded. She had spent so much of her life expecting disappointment that she didn't know how to handle a moment of pure joy. But tonight she allowed herself to be happy. Once she had settled, Rhoda leaned towards Fadik and whispered, "Tell the MC to give Folake the microphone." Fadik frowned. "For what?" Rhoda yawned lazily and stretched her arms. "Let her sing." Fadik's eyes widened. "Are you insane? She's not ready." Rhoda gave her a lazy smile. "She has no choice." Courtesy of Rogel Music plc. Fadik hesitated, but she knew better than to argue with Rhoda. A moment later, the MC's voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we have a special treat for you. Please welcome the sensational voice of our very own, Folake Akinwale. All eyes turned to Folake. She froze. Her face went pale. Her heart pounded. This was not part of the plan. She almost collapsed. Rhoda. But before she could protest, Akinwale's mother grabbed her hand. Go and sing, my dear. Akinwale's father smiled proudly. Funso and the rest of the family started clapping for her, chanting her name. The crowd followed. Folake! 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 With no way out, Folake took a deep breath and walked to the stage. The moment she held the microphone, something changed. The panic melted away. The music started, and she began to sing. Her voice filled the air like magic. It was raw, pure, unforgettable. The audience was mesmerized. Unknown to her, hidden cameras were recording everything. The moment she finished, the crowd erupted in cheers. Akinwale's family rushed to embrace her. Tears of joy streamed down Folake's face. Rhoda, as usual, yawned lazily and stretched her arms. Your album will be ready latest next week. Folake's mouth dropped open. What? Rhoda smirked. Congratulations. You're officially a star. The entire Akinwale family cheered loudly. Folake couldn't believe it. This was the beginning of her introduction to the world. As the cheers from Folake's stunning performance died down, the MC stepped forward again with a mischievous smile. Ladies and gentlemen, we have someone very important who wants to say a few words. He gestured toward the high table. Aya Erike, please take the microphone. The crowd clapped as Aya Erike stood up. She took the microphone, cleared her throat, and looked around at the sea of faces watching her. She knew exactly what they all thought of her daughter. And tonight, she was going to correct them. She took a deep breath and spoke with firm authority. I have heard so many people say that Erike is lazy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Please subscribe. That she cannot cook, cannot wash her clothes, cannot fetch water, cannot take care of a family. That she is useless. Some people chuckled in agreement. Aya Erike raised a hand, silencing them. You only know what you know. But what you do not know about my daughter is far more than what you know. The audience grew silent. Akinwale's family leaned in, listening intently. Erike is an early riser, Aya Erike continued. If she has pepper to grind, she grinds it at 4 a.m. Gasps filled the air. She does all her work early and quietly. She does not like to show off. But because you don't see her working, you all assume she does nothing. That is a lie. Akinwale's father exchanged glances with his wife. Akinwale himself looked like someone had just thrown cold water on his face. She doesn't work by your normal clock and calendar, Aya Erike went on, her voice rising with passion. Her morning starts at 4 a.m. and ends at 6 a.m., before any of you wake up. She is an expert in hiding things. The Akinwale family stared in shock. Funso, who had been quietly sipping his drink, suddenly choked. Hiding things? An expert? Akinwale's father slowly leaned toward his wife and muttered under his breath. The day this woman sees what her daughter is really hiding, she will faint. Akinwale's mother nodded gravely. We should have an ambulance on standby that day. Meanwhile, Aya Erike was still talking, her voice growing even more determined. Erike is not a lazy girl. She paused for effect before repeating, even more firmly. She is not lazy. The crowd roared with applause. Even those who had believed otherwise found themselves nodding. By now, the MC was grinning ear to ear. He took the mic from Aya Erike and turned toward Rhoda Erike. And now, to give us the closing remarks, the lady of the moment, Rhoda. The crowd cheered, chanting her name. Rhoda, lounging lazily in her chair, let out a long, exaggerated yawn. She stretched her arms dramatically and blinked at the crowd, looking unimpressed. Then, to everyone's surprise, she simply said, I'm sorry, I'm tired. I'll give you the speech yesterday. The crowd froze. A moment of confused silence. People turned to one another, frowning. Yesterday? Someone whispered, Wait, what? Then, the realization hit them, and the entire crowd burst into uncontrollable laughter. Hoots, claps, shouts of disbelief. Akinwale shook his head, laughing hard. His father held his stomach, wheezing. Even Aya Erike, who had been so serious moments ago, couldn't stop herself from chuckling. Rhoda just stood up, yawned again, and lazily hopped into the car. The car door slammed shut. And just like that, she was gone. Please subscribe and leave your comment.